What is up, Seattle? Welcome back to Iconic Sonics. My name is Danny Ball. I've got two great guests for you. Chris Daniels and Tim Booth are here to talk about the news that you've surely heard by now. Adam Silver, ahead of the NBA Cup Finals, announcing that the league will make a determination on expansion teams next year, 2026. They're here to break all that down as well as cover some of the local hoops hype that's been going on here in Seattle. Before we get to that great year-end episode, I want to give 4 quick shout-outs. They're our top sponsors. These guys make Iconic Sonics possible, and we just want to give a shout-out. We're going to start off with Epic Seats. They've done a lot of great giveaways, so some of you listeners have benefited from our partnerships with them. They've got everything from concerts to sports tickets, Mariners, Seahawks, Kraken, you name it. Be sure to check out epicseats.com for all of your ticket needs. Next up, we've got the Hall Group. Juice and Gary and everybody else over there is always absolutely amazing to us. They support the return of the Sonics like nobody else. They've got the best pre-games before Storm games, before Kraken games, before concerts. You can go down now to the Hall on Occidental before Seahawks games, before Mariners games. You can go and check out the Moss Bay Hall out near Kirkland. They had Sean Kemp in a Santa suit. What's not to love about that? So shout out to the Hall Group. Make sure you check out Queen Anne Beer Hall before those Sonics games when they eventually come back. Swinomish Casino and Lodge is up next. They are absolutely amazing. They hosted myself, Desmond Mason, earlier this year. We got to hit the golf course. Desmond met a bunch of fans that were there. They stood in line. They got autographs from him. It was absolutely amazing. They've hosted Sean Kemp and done a number of different Sonics events for us. So shout out to Swinomish Casino and Lodge. It is always worth the trip going up there. And last but certainly not least, Simply Seattle. It is the world's largest retailer of Sonics gear. It's your number one stop shop, and they're a great sponsor of this podcast. So shout out to them. Now, let's get right into that conversation. We've got some awesome insights on what Adam Silver said. Chris and Tim have been covering this issue in Seattle sports in general for a very long time, and they do it super well. I can't even start to talk about how privileged I am to be able to have these guys on call to do an episode like this. So shout out to them. Shout out to Brett behind the scenes for producing everything this year. It's been a huge year. Thank you to everybody that's listened, everybody that's followed. We had a lot of social media success this year. And just in general, I'm super excited for what lies ahead in 2026, whether that is expansion, whether that is the number one player in high school being here, whether that maybe be UW making a little run in the tournament. Who knows? Seattle is a hoops town. Seattle feels like it's absolutely rolling right now with momentum in regards to getting the Sonics back. So just shout out to everybody that made it possible this year from the bottom of my heart. I can't believe that I get to do this and that it's brought me some of the opportunities it has. So thank you. I've got a great episode for you coming up right now. All right, Iconic Sonics fans, I've got 2 titans of media here. Tim Booth and Chris Daniels are with me from the Seattle Times and KOMO, respectively. We're here to talk about Adam Silver's announcement, as well as some other local Seattle hoop stuff. But first off, guys, how are you, and how is 2025 for you?
I'm doing well, thank you. Hope you're doing well too, Danny. 2025 was there was a lot of stuff in 2025. It was a busy year. So all things considered, I think it was a good year for the most part. Chris, how about you?
Well, Tim, as you know, I juggle a lot of stuff over at KOMO TV, and right now I'm currently just trying to dry out from all the flooding that's happened in Western Washington. But I think it's been an interesting year, both in news and sports and politics and all those dynamics that go into this conversation about the Sonics and what's going on behind the scenes and the strength of the local franchises. I think it's been a good year, obviously, for the Seahawks. It's been a good year in some respects for the Sounders and what they experienced, and obviously for the Mariners. I think it's been one of the best years ever. So I think that all factors into why the NBA continues to keep their eyes on Seattle as a market, seeing just how the city has performed in all of these different other sporting events.
And even on top of that, we've got the World Cup coming up to add on to the soccer fever locally, I think, which is another huge, obviously, international opportunity for the city to kind of show off. Tim, I'll highlight what you said. It is a lot of ups and downs. For the first time ever, I went down to Las Vegas Summer League, and we kind of saw the ups and downs of the Sonics, hopeful there. Before we get into that and kind of the news that Adam delivered before the NBA Cup, we've also been running around on Iconic Sonics trying to cover the local basketball scene. We got the number one high school player in the country Hannes Steinbeck and UW are starting to make some noise. They had a great comeback against USC. I guess I'll start with Tim and then Chris. What have you guys, what's your guys' kind of experience this year with getting out there and seeing local basketball in general? Have you guys been a part of that, and what are your thoughts?
Well, to be fair, I've been like Chris juggling about a million different things. It feels like, but so I haven't gotten out to many games. I think I've only gone out to one game so far, but it does, in some ways, it does feel like we're kind of going into a new chapter of like what Seattle basketball kind of has been. In the past, you think about like go back to the early 2000s when you had that crew of Brandon, Will Conroy, Trey Simmons, all those guys who kind of ended up at UW. You had Jamal in the league at that point. Then that's followed up by guys like Isaiah Thomas and like that next John Brockman, like that next wave of sort of the local guys who may have played here collegiately, but then found their way into the league. And then outside of Paulo, it's and a few guys here and there really hasn't been that kind of that upswell of it feels like anyway of local guys making names for themselves. But it kind of it kind of feels like it's coming back around a little bit when you have a guy like Tyron Stokes who's wildly impressive to watch play. End up at Beach and he's playing with JJ Crawford, Jamal's kid. And JJ looks really like he might be an elite player at some point. And then you have, some better talent at UW. You got a little connection with Zoom playing there. You got some international influx. Like I don't know. It sort of feels like maybe it's rekindling a little bit. And who knows if the timing lines up with maybe the potential of some NBA movement, but it does kind of feel like we're in a new chapter right now of what Seattle basketball that we've known from the past, kind of moving into this next generation.
Yeah, I've seen the highlights of the kid from Beach and followed actually what happened over at Garfield with Brandon Roy mysteriously being fired, which I think is interesting after the success he had there. I'm really just hoping that Jamal can bring back the Pro-Am, which was a platform that allowed a lot of these high school kids to be seen. I can remember Baby Boy being the guy that was taken out of the wing of Jamal, and we've seen his success in the NBA now as well. So I'm hoping that comes back this summer, and perhaps it comes back during the summer when we're talking more and more about the NBA in Seattle, one way or the other.
And there's been some unbelievable pro-am moments for sure. I know Jamal, I believe it was a Seattle Times profile he did earlier in the year, saying that he thinks he's going to bring it back now that JJ is a freshman and kind of getting to that age where they'll allow the top local high school guys into the pro-am. I believe he even threw around two names of Steph Curry and Zion Williamson expressing interest to come and play in it. Hopefully they move that one over to Climate Pledge rather than at
Yeah.
PU. Like when they had LeBron. Yeah, I agree. I think it's very exciting with that timeline. And kind of in that sense, I mentioned Vegas earlier, and I do kind of want to step back and think back to this summer a little bit. Going into Vegas, I was probably at a 7.5 or an 8 excitement level of where we were at and the momentum that felt like it was building. It felt like when we went down to Vegas and heard Adam Silver say, this is day one of expansion, that there was somebody that was kind of slowly letting the air out of the balloon, and it didn't really feel like much. And if anything, it felt maybe like a step backward, that after all these years of teasing, he was using a man who's so particular about the words he's using. He's saying this is day one. I guess let's stop there. Where were you guys at this summer with that stuff and kind of that part of the announcement from Adam of we're now just starting to look at this? Can you guys kind of talk about where you were at?
Tim and I were both in the same room for that and for the Board of Governors announcement from, or lack thereof, from the commissioner. And I think that this is not any sort of trade secret, but when Adam Silver goes into a room like that, he knows the reporters that are going to be in the room and what they're going to be asking about. And the fact that Tim and I were both there, he knows he's going to be asked about Seattle. And I think the expectation going in was that he was going to make some sort of kind of statement about we're going to study this at the league office formally, even though we have already formally discussed this at the league office and that this was going to be a step forward. and that he doesn't have the support from the needed owners to move the ball forward, for lack of a better term. And that's what he said. He clearly had a statement in mind to both Tim and I when we asked a question about just what this process is and how it's different than any time in the past. And I think, I walked out of that room thinking that the Sonics were further away from reality than closer, which is different than what I thought even 6 months, 9 months before, when things were kind of bubbling up in September or October before that, back in 24. So it's interesting. I know we're going to talk about what was just said recently, but I kind of thought they were putting the brakes on things a little bit walking out of that room, and pushing things perhaps to the end of the decade.
Yeah, I would echo what Chris said, that when we left Thomas and Mack Center that night, I really felt like it's 2029, 2030 at the earliest before this is going to come to fruition, because it really felt like the idea of them getting this league, this branded operation in Europe launched was going to be the priority, because it's a new revenue stream, it's new markets, it's new opportunities for the league's owners to put dollars in their pockets. So the way he said what he said that night, it did feel like, okay, we're hitting a little bit of a roadblock here. We're going to get Europe taken care of first, and then we'll circle back around to whatever wants to take place in domestically. I remember at that meeting kind of hearing rumblings that there was a lot of concerns about what the ownership situation in Vegas was going to be. What was the building situation in Vegas going to look like? Was there going to be another arena built there? Were they going to cut a deal with T-Mobile to with the Knights and figure out a way to make that work? Like there was a lot of questions, not only about Seattle but about Vegas at the same time, that led to everyone walking out of that room, it seemed like, going, okay, well, we'll revisit this in 28 after they get through the Olympics and after they get through launching this Europe League, and then we'll reconvene then to have a serious discussion about what this is gonna look like. So like Chris said, I think the fact of what we're going to talk about here and what Adam had to say before the NBA Cup, I think makes you wonder what's changed a lot in the last 5 months, because that night in Vegas, I don't think any of us felt like we would be at the point of they're going to make it a determination in 26 of what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And Danny, the one surprise that came out of that room was, and again, everything that Adam Silver says is calculated, was the idea that Portland needs a new arena.
Right.
Which really became the headline, I think, for a lot of people coming out of there, and then leads to the question of relocation and these other leases that are up, and perhaps there's a game to be played there as well. But I think that was the most interesting news that came out of that July press conference down in Vegas was, okay, Portland needs to do something too now. He that's not a throwaway line from him. He's definitely putting that out there in the ether, hoping that sticks and makes a point, especially as it did in Portland.
Yeah, and I think that's a really interesting thing to latch onto, and I think it led to 1 + 1 = 2 of a lot of people, especially disgruntled fans, and rightfully so. They feel as if Seattle is touted over the league as this is what can happen if you don't build this arena, and I think both of those statements, like you said, him kind of walking back where they were at, feeling like the air was let out of the balloon, and then that coupled with Portland needs a new arena felt like more of that dangling the Seattle carrot kind of in front of a franchise. And I know a lot of us kind of came out of it. I, for one, I was sitting in my hotel room in Vegas, just kind of with ESPN on a loop in the background, just kind of sitting there with existential dread of, how far down this Sonic hole have I gone, and is it now too far gone? Let's start kind of in that same vein of just generally the surprise and the kind of sentiment that y'all had after what Adam said before the NBA Cup. After this, I'd love to get in and kind of break down some of the nitty gritty, but let's just start with a bigger view. Obviously, kind of even in your answers just now, you both said that you were both kind of surprised, but Chris and then Tim, what were your immediate reactions to that press conference this week from Adam?
Well, I think if you again go over his words and you look at the transcript, it's essentially what he's said in the past. And all he's said here is they're looking at expansion, and it's Seattle and Vegas. He was a little bit more direct about that. And then towards the end of the statement says, well, we're going to figure this out in 2026. I've always viewed what Silver has said as sending messages externally and internally, telling his ownership internally that he would like to get this done in 2026, and telling people externally that they are open for business. I mean, you think about this, that this is going to be a major transaction involving multiple entities, there perhaps an ownership group that's going to have to take on debt. And all of that could have been put together in 2024 before the brakes were put on then. So Silver could be here making a signal externally that they're going to be open for business in 2026, and to start putting those financing plans in place again. And then telling the owners he wants to get it done. I mean, I do think he has support from multiple owners inside the league, but he wants to get it to David Stern threshold. He wants to make this for lack of a better term, a slam dunk, and that there's no vote that rejects expansion at a board of governors meeting, which would be egg on his face. I think he wants to get it done. He just doesn't have the support, and by saying 2026, that's his way of signaling to multiple entities that he'd like to finish this once and for all, one way or the other, in 26.
We all work better with a deadline, right? I mean, that's the thing with in our industry is you give us a deadline and we'll figure out a way to hit it. I think, like Chris said, I think Adam wants to have this finished. I think he wants. I think he understands more and more, and I think he made a point of mentioning it in his comments about how they don't want it to come across as though they're teasing or dragging it along for Seattle, I think specifically, and Vegas, the fans there that have been heard us talk about this for several years now of is this going to happen? Is this a possibility? I think he wants his ownership group to, or his owners to say, okay, fork in the road, line in the sand, whatever you want to say it, be on one side or the other. Are we doing this? Are you willing to give up your, instead of 1/30th, 1/32nd cut of what our revenues are, in order to bring these two cities into the league? So I think, as Chris said, I think it was a message both internally to his owners that, hey, we're going to go down this road this year and have to make a decision on this, but externally, hey, we are very much open to business, and if you have a expression of interest for wanting to own a team in one of these two markets, please come forward, because we need to have these conversations. We need to know who you are. They probably already know who they are internally. They probably have an idea of who might come forward, but this is their way of turning on the open for business light outside the diner or inside the diner, and welcoming people in to finally have real, probably substantive conversations about is this going to happen or not?
It's a great segue. One of the things I had written down here was I wanted to get into some of the detailed notes and lines that Adam had in the summer press conference, and kind of compare them to where we're at now. When the idea of expansion was brought up, he said there weren't any sides, that this was not a conversation about people that wanted to expand versus not wanting to expand. It was simply a conversation about exploring expansion. It now feels like to me, inevitably, that these sides will become more rigidly kind of defined, of people that are pro and anti-expansion. Obviously, the name that comes to mind for people that are against it is James Dolan. But Tim, what do you think will kind of be the development of that, and what does that look like?
Well, I think the sides are already there are some sides that are already formed. There are some owners who will undoubtedly be in favor of it, and because it puts money in their pockets, fresh income into their pockets. Think of go through your list of franchises in the NBA right now that are quote unquote struggling. Any of those owners would be happy to have a check of $400 million between two potential expansion fees coming into their pockets. So those are the owners that are going to be in favor of it. It's the owners who either feel like they want to capture all the revenue that they can and do not want to give up a cut, two cuts of what that would be, or those who just are greedy owners and don't want to see either the talent pool diluted or the potential uncertainty of what the economics will look like with adding 2 more teams. Those are the ones you're going to have to win over. And the problem is that you've had so much change among your ownership owners in the last 10 years or so. There's not many legacy owners remaining who understand what it was like in 2008 and understand what the heartbreak was locally in Seattle of losing that team and understand the legacy of what the market was here for 41 years. So those are people that you're going to have to win over through this process as well. But there's clear delineation right now, and you have to get to 3/4 in order to move this along, but you really need to get to 28. Really, if something like this happens, if something like this passes, it will not be 22 in favor, 8 against, 20 in favor, 10 against, whatever the number ends up being. It'll be 28 or 29 in favor, and James Dolan probably forever against something like this ever happening.
Well, and part of the math here too, it's been speculated that perhaps the Seattle or Vegas franchise would have to give up the revenue sharing for the first couple of years to try and make the math work, to try and win over some of those owners. I do believe that Clay Bennett is for this. I'm sure that there are other owners who are looking at improvements to their arenas. Everybody talks about Memphis and New Orleans and the issues that they're having. Those owners could be very supportive of getting a nice check directly into their coffers to pay for improvements or to pay for other things in their arena sphere or a mixed use development. The new owners of the Blazers, once they officially take over, that's a land play. They'd probably like the money as well. And then, the aspect here in 2026, if they decide, hey, we don't have support to expand, the conversation is going to immediately turn to the lease deals in 2029 that are up. So I do think there is some connection. I know Silver didn't want to make that connection necessarily in his statements this week at the NBA Cup, but there could be some connective tissue between 2026 and 2029 here as we talk about this.
Another thing that he mentioned, and I know, Chris, I've heard you talk about it before, so I'll aim this one at you to start, was local media deals, and that didn't come up this time around. I think obviously with the news and some of the announcements he were making, it was a much larger kind of macro view versus this summer. I feel like he got into kind of more of the nitty gritty. He talked about not wanting to place a team and basically being like, hey, figure out, what your local media rights deal looks like and how you broadcast your games. Can you kind of add any more clarity, maybe for more of the kind of average fan and stuff, what that means and looks like, Chris, for the NBA and potential new teams?
Yeah, in Seattle, I think it's well documented now that Root Sports has gone away, and all these teams are now scrambling to find over-the-air deals that also involve Amazon. For the most part, the Kraken are a team that is on over-the-air broadcast and on Amazon, and Amazon never releases their numbers, but I think most people are watching the Kraken games through Amazon Prime and not over the air. And unfortunately, what that means is the ratings are what the ratings are, and it's tougher to sell advertising. That math then means, hey, this is the number for teams for the rights to broadcast, and all of that has gone down. And every team is now scrambling. There are particular teams like the Jazz who are on over the air. It's done really well. The Vegas Golden Knights are over the air down there. It's done really well, and those models seem to be working for now. But that's what Silver's talking about is what is that space? What is the space that's available for any sort of new franchise? What does that TV package look like? Are we talking about a SuperSonics channel? It's a $19.99 or $29.99 a month, so they can make more money out of the gate. It may work. That may be a model that works for a new franchise, but that's why it's so complicated right now, especially as the media industry, including my own, struggles with consolidation and different station groups and different networks and streaming. It's a really complicated space right now, and that's what Silver's talking about. And I believe him when he's saying that is a factor in what the expansion will look like and how expansion works because of the decreasing revenues for franchises, no matter the sport, in regional sports networks.
And part of that, it's a great segue. Part of that is these leagues are starting to explore the idea of bringing all the regional or all the local broadcasts in-house and then distributing them that way. You see it kind of in a way with what the Mariners are going to be doing in 2026, where MLB is going to be responsible for the production and distribution of their games. It's just going to be, the channel we've all known Root to be on will go live at 6:30, 6:25 or whatever, and it's going to be Mariners TV, and it's going to be a broadcast that's produced by Major League Baseball. The NBA has talked about going down that route as well as trying to bring as much as they can in-house, but the problem that you run into is you're getting distributions, say if you're the Lakers, that are not the distributions that you're getting if you're the Pelicans or if you're the Grizzlies. And so any idea of bringing things under one umbrella, you have to take into account that factor of, okay, how do we pay out properly what the Lakers are going to generate in LA and pay out properly what the Grizzlies are going to make in Memphis? And how does that math come about and work out, to fairly compensate each franchise? So Chris is right. Like this is absolutely going to be a factor for every league, but especially as you talk about expansion, and how that is all going to look, because you kind of have to have a general idea of what your revenues and what your balance, your budget is going to look like, if you're about to launch, one or two new teams.
In that conversation, the Kraken obviously came up. The Seattle Hockey Club has kind of been the front runners for as long as I've been invested in this topic, for the group that would probably be the Sonics ownership group. Where, Tim, I guess, but we can start with you. Where do you think that group is at as far as lobbying for this, with the league? I know that there's a lot of people within that group that have been part of other NBA ownership groups. We've had people on the podcast that have said the league is very familiar with that group. Where do you think that they're at now, kind of in the process, economics wise, of kind of lobbying for this?
To me, this is the biggest question, and it makes me wonder what has changed so much in the last 5 months. Because we heard it for years with Todd Leiweke when we were talking about the NHL, that they were never going to get ahead of the commissioners. They were never going to get ahead of what they were saying when it came to the idea of adding the Kraken, what eventually became the Kraken, to the NHL. This group, the Seattle Hockey Group, the Kraken Group, however you want to frame it, they've been very careful as not to sort of cheerlead or champion the idea. They've always said, hey, we'll be here when the opportunity comes about. For Adam to suddenly say, we're going to address this in 2026, makes me feel like something has changed, even since September when they had their last Board of Governors meeting, where it makes me feel like someone somewhere behind the scenes has come out and said, okay, Adam, if you want to really pursue Seattle, we have the money, we have the funds, we have the people lined up in order to do this. Because I think there was a feeling among some within the NBA that they weren't sure if it was going to be there from the Kraken Group. That as much as they knew David Bonderman, and they knew what David Bonderman's wealth and his bank account looked like, they weren't entirely sure what Samantha Holloway's, bank account and what her wealth actually was, even though, she's part of her father's inheritance. So it makes me feel like there's something there that's changed, whether that's they brought in someone from the outside, whether, Andy Jassy has gotten Jeff on board, and this, Bezos is going to be whoever it is. It just makes me feel like for Adam to suddenly say 26 is a definitive year, we're going to look at this and make a decision, that someone behind the scenes has come forward and said, hey, the money, if you end up deciding to do Seattle, the money will be there. Because I think that's the one question that has lingered as we've seen the valuations of these franchises grow, to where what maybe was an expansion fee of $4 billion in 24 and early 25, it might be an expansion fee of 6.5, 7 billion in 2026 when a decision is made one way or the other. So there's always going to be groups that come out of nowhere. I think you could safely say that Tom Dundon coming out of nowhere to buy the Blazers was not something that was on really anybody's radar. And then all of a sudden, here comes the owner of the Hurricanes in to make that purchase. So groups can pop up out of nowhere. But if we're talking specifically about the Kraken group, the Seattle group, I wonder if something has changed in the last few months to where they feel more confident that the money will be there for them.
And you're right that ownership group has changed. There's no more, David Bonderman, unfortunately, has passed Tim Lightwicki. Lenny Wilkins has also passed. He was a face of this kind of movement. The Kraken, just kind of bluntly, are struggling in year 5. Chris, what do you kind of think of all that, and what's the math there for you on where that group is at?
Yeah, I think Tim had a great analysis there, and with Dundon in particular, he's trying to sell off part of the Hurricanes to help finance that deal in Portland. And what I tend to pay attention to is those financial transactions. Way back when Steve Ballmer sold a bunch of stock in Microsoft and made the run at the Kings, so that may be happening behind the scenes. I know that Kraken ownership group was really kind of gearing up for September, October of 24. There was a lot of buzz then that something was about to happen, and then it didn't. And I think we've seen some of the work in discussion locally in Seattle kind of temper. We'll see what happens here in the next couple of months. I've always been curious why they've never wanted to go public with their investment group. That was a card that was played by Tim Lightwicki when he was trying to get the arena done, suggesting who David Bonderman was, and he was the lead investor, and Jerry Bruckheimer, and that gave him some extra wind in the sails to get that deal across the finish line with not only the city but the National Hockey League. And this group, at least locally, has decided not to do that, which raises some natural questions, and perhaps that'll be a card that's played before 2026 to try and push it over the finish line, at least with the NBA. Or we'll find out, perhaps they don't have that money, or it is another group that has decided to come forward. I think, again, that's what Adam Silver is saying in a press conference like that. It's that they're open for business and they're going to make a decision.
I think that's a great point, Chris. I think they need to play that card. Like if they have it, they need to play it sometime in the first quarter, maybe even before we get to the All-Star game in February, of like, hey, we have the people, here are our people. And you're absolutely right. When David Bonderman's name got floated as being part of the Kraken group, it gave it a different level of legitimacy. It gave it that kind of cachet of like, hey, there is a very wealthy dude who is behind what we're trying to accomplish here in Seattle. So if this group has that person or people, they need to put it out there, because I think there is a lot of general skepticism, especially for people who don't know who Sam Holloway is, back east, of like, hey, who are your people? Oh, it's XYZ person and they're worth this much money. Okay, now we can take your overtures with a little bit more seriousness about making this actually happen.
I feel like a lot of the sentiment that has come out of that group is that we're not going to get a plan ready or a pitch ready until the NBA says, "Hey, we're ready to take pitches." And they haven't exactly said that, but the the metaphor that both of you guys have used is that the NBA has flicked that open for business light on, which is basically as close to saying we're ready for city proposals as you can get without actually opening that process up. Chris, one name you mentioned that I have to kind of ask a follow up here on is Steve Ballmer. Obviously, there's a lot going on with the aspiration investigation with the Clippers. They also, namely, are the host of the All-Star game this year in an ironic way. Does any of this have to do with Adam Silver wanting there to be new, better discussion around the NBA? You think that factored into his decision to kind of move this up, or is this too big of a decision to kind of try to use that to water down the other scandals and even the betting stuff that went on in Portland and with
Yeah,
Terry Stotts?
no, great question. I do think it came up in that NBA Cup availability that he had too, because all the questions out of the gate were about the betting scandal and about
Right,
Ballmer and kind of
right.
sidestep that, and expansion came up halfway in, and hey, let's talk about this because it's not as dicey as those others. Whether they're related, I don't know. I mean, Ballmer has been an advocate for Seattle. He's brought 3 exhibition games to Climate Pledge Arena. He clearly wants the NBA to return to Seattle. If there was something that happened with his ownership down there, and I'm not saying it will, especially with hosting of the All-Star game, I think that Seattle would be losing an advocate for bringing the Sonics back. So it's worth watching, but I don't know if one issue is connected necessarily to the other.
There's also a part of it in my mind that is directly related to the European side of it. Tim, I know you were kind of talking about it earlier, but there's so many moving parts right now. I guess how do you see the NBA landing the plane here? Maybe in an ideal scenario, right? With that league and with expansion, what is that kind of in a perfect world kind of look like to you right now? And can you see them getting to that point?
It's funny that, Adam said in September that that the European discussions and any looking at domestic expansion were not intertwined, and they're running on parallel paths. But I remember leaving that meeting in July in Vegas and having a longtime NBA reporter pull me aside, and we were talking, and he said the NBA can't do two things at once. They're incapable of actually doing two projects at one time. So you have, the Europe thing, and you have the domestic talk, and now you have the aspiration investigation, you have the gambling probe. There's a lot going on for the league. So it just brings back to the whole point of like being really interesting that he finally put a timeline or a deadline on this whole thing, because they do have a lot of, as you said, a lot of planes to land that they probably have to get figured out sometime in 26. Like, they're going to have to come to a resolution about the gambling probe and situation. If they can put any guardrails on trying to prevent situations like this from coming up in the future, they're going to have to make some sort of headway on what's gone on with the Clippers and Ballmer, and if there's actually how much is true about this aspiration investigation. The part about Europe, I don't think I actually don't think it's going to take that long, because it seems like they're trying to figure out partnerships with existing European soccer powers, whether it's Man United, Real Madrid. It seems like they're trying to create that kind of partnership. And a lot of those teams, especially the teams more in mainland Europe, they already have some semblance of a basketball arm to their franchises. Barcelona does, Madrid does. I think a couple of the German teams do as well. So creating that league, creating that framework, I think is more to do with partnerships than it is starting, new. There will be a few new franchises, but I think it's more like, hey, what's this partnership and how is that going to look? And so partnerships, I don't think are going to take as long to figure out. So it's conceivable that by the time we get through, the end of 26, it might not be ready to launch quite yet, but they made a lot of headway on Europe and been able to at least create the framework of what that's going to be, what it's going to look like, have MOUs in place or whatever it might be. And if they can get that sort of taken care of, then it allows them more freedom to really look at what domestic expansion is going to be. That's the other part of this that I think is a great unknown. Is, okay, he said sometime in 26. Well, what does that mean? We know when the important meetings are. They have a March April meeting, they have their summer meeting in Vegas, and they have a September meeting. So which one of those is it going to be? And can you actually get to the point of making a decision within the first 9 months of the year, to where at that September meeting you're ready to say something, or are we really kicking it toward the end of 26, or was it all just throwing a number out there, and this conversation is going to last a lot longer?
Well, and I would caution, I would just piggyback that, thinking about 26, he said they were going to address expansion in the fall and then during the season. I mean, so he's moved the dates on the expansion talk in the past. And to Tim's point with 2026, that's 12 months long. Perhaps it's he gets to September, October again and says, okay, I'm at 26, 27. So I mean, we've seen that movie before.
Right, right. Yeah, and I think that's it's a natural question for people. I got Google notifications set up. I'm waiting for this news at any given moment. But for more of the casual and general kind of Seattle audience, Tim, you just kind of highlighted a couple of those meetings. As far as the next 3 to 6 months, what can Seattle and Sonics hopeful kind of look for those meetings? Obviously, we don't know when these announcements will come, but just as far as the actual kind of timeline of when the owners will be together, when Adam will have press conferences, are there any kind of dates that we can kind of circle on the calendar?
Well, he always addresses the media. They have a meeting around the All-Star game in February, and based on what he just said, I would expect he's asked about it again there. Whether he makes any sort of announcement is another story. And then you start looking towards the end of the NBA season as potentially another date on the calendar. Whether he would want to make any sort of grand announcement as it's competing with the World Cup is another whole story. And then you're looking to the fall. So Tim and I have both experienced this calendar and knowing when the meetings are and where they are and the kind of cadence every quarter. I think you would want to see something from a Seattle perspective, playing their cards, putting their cards out there to suggest that they are ready, which we've talked about on this podcast that they've been reluctant to do. And that perhaps would change the conversation just based on what Silver had to say this week.
I think Chris is right. I think the first quarter of the year is going to be really important to see if anyone's willing to come forward, or the Seattle group is willing to be a little bit more front facing on this process of like, hey, we're here, hi, don't forget about us. Oh, and by the way, here's our funding, here's our people that are behind it. I tend to think the September meeting is probably, that's probably going to be the important one. Chris brings up a great point. Like, you don't want to announce expansion unless you're trying to steal the news window. I don't think you want to announce expansion a couple days before. I mean, it might even be the day of the World Cup semifinal, or a couple days before the World Cup final. Especially if somehow the U.S. got there, or Mexico, or one of the host countries ended up there. So I think you're going to see incremental steps as this process continues, because you're right, he's going to get asked about it every time. I tend to think that the September meeting might end up being the one that's really important in this process.
That's great. Well, we'll definitely keep an eye on it. Here at Iconic Sonics, we've proudly kind of just made it through all the waves of the ups and downs of this. And so we're just trying to kind of keep plugging on. We appreciate both you guys coming on to talk about it and break it down in more depth. You guys are extremely close to the issue, and the reporting you've both done on it has helped me understand the world that is NBA business a lot more. I guess I'd lead with this as far as just kind of hopeful timelines. Do either of you have a date? We were talking about Vegas and thinking, all right, it's probably 2029, 2030 after that. Do you feel like that's moved up? Is there kind of a new potential start date that either of you feel comfortable kind of putting out there of where you think the Sonics being back could land?
Well, I mean, I'll just jump in and say 2026, make a decision on expansion. That could mean a lot of things. That could mean the start of a process, an application process. It could mean, okay, the owners have said we're going to allow one team, two teams. We're going to stagger it out over a couple of years. It won't be until 28 or 29. I mean, we don't know exactly what Silver is suggesting here in terms of the start of a new franchise. So it still could be 28, 29. It could also be a leverage play for those other franchises that we've discussed that are having financial issues. So he said they want to make a decision in 26, but what that decision is, I still think we're a few years off from that.
I'll be optimistic here. I won't rain on the parade like Chris. The I've had multiple NBA people tell me that you can do it in 18 months, but you need 2 years preferably to launch a franchise. So let's go best case scenario here. They're adding 2 teams. You announce it in September of 26. They can start in September of 20. They can start the 28-29 season. I think that is the most optimistic timeline you can have right now for this potentially happening. But to Chris's point, we have no idea what that actually meant from what Adam said. They could very easily come back and say, sorry, the economics don't work. Sorry, we don't have enough support. Sorry, it just doesn't pencil out. Right now, we'll revisit you in 2032 and have this conversation again. So I don't know where it's going to go from here, but I think if you're a fan and you want to stay optimistic about it, 2028 is probably the earliest you will see an NBA team in Seattle.
We kind of said the same thing, Tim.
We did.
Well, that's great. And again, thank you guys for doing the reporting that you do and keeping us informed as well as stopping by the show. We will be keeping an eye on it throughout this whole process. And 2028 would be nice. It'd be a nice 20-year stamp on them coming back after 2008. So thanks as always, and be sure to check out Tim's work with the Seattle Times and Chris on KOMO as always. Thanks so much, guys.
Thanks, Danny.
You bet.